It's the BSDFS Fantasy Football Podcast. If you don't know, now you know. If you ain't listening, why not? Boom.
This is the BSDFS Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by Scotty and Brian, with the quick picks that make you the quick bucks. We're going to succinctly cover the highlighted picks that will make you money. Let's get into it. Scotty, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
Sure. The first quarterback I want to talk about this week is Deshaun Watson going against Oakland. He is sitting at 7,100, which it makes him the second most expensive quarterback on the slate, but it's just a really good matchup, and I really like Watson to go off this week. He's going against an Oakland team that's currently ranked 30th against the pass, looking at the DVOA rankings, and they're actually pretty good against the run, sitting at 11th. So it's definitely going to be a game that Watson's going to need to be involved in.
And Oakland's been able to keep in the games too.
Yeah, I mean, they're not as bad off as people would have thought, especially after the whole Brown debacle.
Yeah, very true. I definitely didn't count them in at all. I thought they were out for the count.
But they are averaging 289 passing yards allowed, and if you look at last week, they allowed 5 passing touchdowns and a QB sneak for a touchdown, or a QB run for a touchdown, I should say.
Yeah, he's always good on his feet too, so he can pick up yards passing and running on his own.
But if you look at Watson's numbers over the last 3, he's averaging 36 attempts a game, 338 passing yards, and it's actually the highest total of the week at 51.5. They have Houston favored by 6.5.
I saw that the Atlanta game was actually supposed to be higher, but I mean that was before they knew that Matt Ryan wasn't going to be in there, which I guess is still on the fence. But that's the only other game that I saw with a higher point total.
Oh yeah, that's sitting at. I checked earlier. It's sitting at 51, so it's literally like a half-point difference.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I saw that it was a bit higher in the beginning, but without Matt Ryan in there, there's no way that game's going to be that high scoring. But, all right. Well, let me go ahead and go into my first pick, which is going to be Kyler Murray. I just think this one, I mean, I know I seem to be on him every single week, but I feel like for good reason. This time, the game plan does not really line up as did before, because before the Giants just, they didn't have any run defense whatsoever. And I just didn't really expect it to pan out that way with going on the backup running back, which, I mean, he showed that he can play, but I feel like in this type of situation with New Orleans, with one of the better run defenses, and it's just going to be one of those games where they have to air it out a lot. And I just see them sitting in that situation. They're going to be in New Orleans, so I see them kind of getting behind right away, and they're going to have to start keeping up by getting some air yards in there. And again, another one of the quarterbacks that can keep on going on his feet. So that's always in his favor.
That's definitely a bit of a risky one, because
Yeah,
New Orleans.
But I think he's due a bounce back.
New Orleans has only allowed like one 300-yard passer this year, and that was Russell Wilson back in week 3, I think.
Yeah, but remember, he can always use his feet as well. So be prepared.
It's definitely going to be a bit risky, though. That New Orleans defense is really good, especially at home. I think they're actually ranked top 10 overall.
I mean, if you look at him in the past, though, I mean, last week was his only really weak performance, and that was due to the fact that the backup running back took it for 3 touchdowns. So I guess agree to disagree on that one.
Yeah.
All right. Go with another one of your picks.
The other one I want to talk about, I'm going to bring back some Jameis Winston. He's going against a Tennessee defense that's a little below average against the pass. They're sitting at 23rd, but they're actually really good against the run, sitting at 3rd. Winston's volume has just kind of actually gone up over the past couple weeks. He's averaging a little over 39 attempts a game over the last 4, and he's getting 342 passing yards per game over the last 4. I think people are going to be off of him because he just had a terrible game against Carolina with the 5 interceptions.
Yeah.
But
Well,
if you
he
look
still
at
managed 21 points even against that.
right, but if you look at the Carolina defense on paper, they're actually leading the league in sacks, and they're 3rd against the pass. So that was just a terrible matchup for him, and I think he's due for a bounce back this week. You know, the Bucs are coming off of a bye, which always helps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's going to be a little underrated with that recent Carolina game.
Everybody usually doesn't even look at the Tennessee matchups too. So on another note, kind of on the other side of that, I do think that could be a shootout. And I know this is more of a punt play, but kind of get some cheap options, which that way you can go ahead and price up a little bit on some other positions. I like some Ryan Tannehill. He didn't look half bad in his performance last week. And he got 300 plus yards. He was 23 for 29, looked pretty good. His wide receiver 1 is 4,400, Corey Davis. So I don't mind kind of the other side of that, or even like stacking this game up a little bit. I know it's a little bit off the beaten path. I don't think a lot of people are expecting to do that, but I do think it's possible to kind of game stack this game and show some differentiation on that and be able to pick up some points that other people don't expect.
I guess that's a fair point. I don't know. Tannehill just hasn't really been super impressive in the past, but I guess at that price point, you might be worth the gamble.
5,100 and 4,400 for your quarterback and wide receiver 1. So, just thinking on that note. But
yeah,
let's move on to some running backs. So, here's one of the ones I'm looking at. Really heavy is some Austin Eckler. I just think that they need to go ahead. The Chargers need to let him loose and play him and go ahead and sit Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon has lost them 2 games in a row. Austin Eckler has shown to be the better back. He's sitting at 5,900 right now. He's consistently getting 5+ receptions per game with more targets than that. And I mean, he's going to be the go-to guy, and if they just let him go and go ahead and put Melvin Gordon on the bench, stop trying to play that out because it's not working out. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they trade Melvin Gordon before trade deadline, just because he's not doing much for them. And I mean, that sit out that he did is not helping his case whatsoever. If it wasn't for those few situations that they put in Melvin Gordon for 1 or 2 yards to get a touchdown that he went ahead and fumbled, Eckler could be getting those touchdowns, which would up his points even more. And he's sitting at averaging like 20+ points a game in fantasy.
See, that pick works if the Chargers are in fact trying to shop Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
But I think everybody's kind of speculating that they might try and do that, but I don't think anybody's heard anything from the Chargers' mouth in regards to that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a football coach, but if a guy has lost me 2 games when, you know, they could be in the running for being decent if they didn't lose those 2 games, I'd be playing the other guy who has shown that they can carry the workload.
Oh, fair enough.
All right, your turn.
So, one I want to bring up, I do like some Gurley this week. My only concern is that he might end up being in a little bit of a committee backfield.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing Gurley's going to get a lot of the early work. He's going to get some of those early touchdowns.
Yeah.
I think Cincinnati is averaging the most rushing yards allowed at 189 per game, which is pretty crazy. The Rams are favored by 12.5, but he's surprisingly under 8,000, which I really thought he would be over the 8K mark.
He's had a rough year so far. He's kind of been up and down. He's had his weeks where he's looked pretty good, but then he's also had the weeks where he hasn't done much of anything. So I could see the price point.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's definitely a good opportunity for him to bounce back. If he doesn't bounce back this week,
super low owned.
You think so? I mean, he's not that expensive going against Cincinnati.
I mean, he's had maybe 1 week where he's really proven that price point, though.
I guess that's fair.
If it was Todd Gurley of last year, I completely agree. But Todd Gurley of this year, I mean, he's had 1 really strong week for 26 points. Other than that, he's been under the 20-point mark. So 7,400 for, maybe 20 points. But again, I do like what you're saying there because Cincinnati is the defense to play him against.
Right.
Because they let you just tear him apart. So I agree on that point, and I think he'll be low owned for the reason that he's been up and down this year.
Well, their number 2 back is questionable at the moment, so that could help his case.
Yeah, true. All right, let me go over one more real quick. I like some James White. Patriots just lost one of their receivers, Josh Gordon. He's on IR. Almost double-digit receptions per week. As far as targets go, he's looked at 10, 9, 8 targets per game. He's basically the Swiss Army knife of that team. It's sitting at 5,100 right now, super cheap. Patriots are going up against Cleveland, and Cleveland has shown that they can get a beat down. So I do think that they've got a really good position to use those running backs. I know that Sony Michel is also going to be another targeted one by everyone, but at the same time, I don't think he has the upside of targets that James White has. Do you have anybody else you want to cover real quick, since we're tight on time?
I think that'll be it for me for now.
Okay. Let's move on to some wide receivers. You go ahead and start us off.
So to go along with my Winston pick earlier, I do like Mike Evans. He's sitting under 7,000. I think both Mike Evans and Godwin are in play.
Yeah.
But,
I think that's
I do
one
like
of the toughest decisions is choosing who out of the two is going to go
Yeah.
on.
But Evans is sitting at a cheaper price point, and he is coming off of a game with 17 targets, which I don't think I've seen that in a long time. I think he's just barely leading the Bucks in targets per game at 9.2. I think Godwin's at 9 last I checked.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I think they're both in play, but I do like Evans at the cheaper price point, and also the fact that he's been kind of trending up in recent weeks.
Yeah, definitely. And I do like that game. I think it's going to be an under-owned game, which is always good, getting that differentiation in there. So one of the guys I wanted to go over was Golden Tate. Lately, Golden Tate has averaged double-digit targets the past 2 weeks and 100-plus yard week. So that's always on the upside. He's sitting at 5,800. They're getting Barkley back in full. He's looking better and better, which is going to take some of the stress off of the receiving defense and leaving more opportunities for them. It's the revenge game storyline. He's going back to his old team, and it's a 49-point total on a game.
I think a lot of the Giants are in play this week. It looks like Shepard might be coming back. I think Ingram's always in play. And, of course, Barkley's kind of expensive still. But
Yeah.
I think most of the Giants receivers are in play this week against the Lions.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, it's always a shootout against the Lions. So.
Not to mention, they're all like around similar price points. They're all sitting in the mid 5,000s. So
yeah, exactly.
Take your pick.
Well, my pick is Golden Tate. Who did you want to go over next?
Another one I want to cover, I guess, to go with my Watson pick earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I do think Hopkins is a good pick this week, but I do like Kenny Stills at the cheap price point.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said before, Oakland is 30th against the pass, but they're pretty good against the run, so it's going to be a lot of Watson, a lot of passing. Stills does have the slightly better matchup with Oakland ranking 29th against wide receiver twos. Fuller's doubtful, which usually
no,
he's
Fuller's
out.
Yeah.
Is he officially out, or is he still?
I believe so. Let's see.
Doubtful.
Yeah, doubtful, but yeah,
it usually means out. And
injury, yeah.
if he does suit up, it's unlikely he'll do much. They'll probably limit him a lot.
Yeah.
But yes.
And Stills basically plays the exact same type of role that Will Fuller does as a slot receiver that can go deep.
Well, yeah, he's going to be the number 2 guy next behind Hopkins, and he's going to take over that role that Fuller was fulfilling.
Yep, and he's very similar skill set.
I mean, he did have a 100-yard game last week against Indy after Fuller went down.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and let me go on to my last one real quick, which similarly goes with one of my quarterback picks, is my Corey Davis. He is a wide receiver 1 sitting at 4,400, going up against one of the worst secondaries. He's at home, which has boosted him in the past. They had a similar game against Atlanta at home, and he was 9 yards short of breaking 100 yards. At the price point, I think it's like an unbeatable price point. Hopefully it puts up a similar week as in last week. He's going up against a weak defense, so that's what I'm hoping for. All right, so let's move on to some tight ends. You want to start us off there?
Yeah, to kind of elaborate on a point I made earlier, I do think Ingram's in a good spot to bounce back this week.
Mm-hmm.
His price dipped quite a bit from a week ago. He's sitting at 5,300, which is 1,200 less.
Wow. Yeah, just because of the reaction to last week.
Yeah, he had a terrible game, but I think New York in general just had a bad game. So
yeah.
Detroit is kind of average against the pass so far, but they're a little below average against tight ends. It's the third highest total of the week at 49.5, but the Lions are favored by a touchdown, so it is going to be on Daniel Jones to throw the ball a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Ingram might be a little off the radar with a bad week 7 against Arizona.
Yeah, true.
So I think it's a good chance for him to bounce back.
Yeah, because he's had pretty solid performances except for that game so far this year. And then, like you said, that price point has dropped. So that's always good. I don't know. I feel like all these middle-range tight end prices are like the go-to picks right now, just because there's not many cheap ones that are consistent. Hunter Henry is one of the guys that I was looking at. He's sitting at almost double-digit targets since he returned from his injury. He's remained fairly cheap for a tight end, sitting at 4,900, and Chicago is 25th against the tight end. Plus, I mean, who do they really have? They have Keenan Allen, and then they've got him. I think Williams is still out. Is that who's the other receiver there?
I would have to look at it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I haven't really paid too close attention to the Chargers, but
yeah, Mike Williams. Oh, he's still in. He's fine, but he hasn't been getting as many targets. So I still think that Hunter Henry's sitting in a really good situation right now.
Yeah, I think there are quite a few tight ends in play this week, sitting right around the 5,000 mark.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Anybody else you want to touch on?
The only other one I got is some Austin Hooper again. This one might be a little tricky depending on Matt Ryan's status, but if Ryan is in, Hooper does become a better play. Seattle's just kind of below average against tight ends. They're below average against the pass. And they're allowing the 4th most DraftKings points against tight ends this season.
Mm-hmm.
And Hooper's still getting the volume. He's second on the team with 7.9 targets a game.
Yeah, I kind of stayed off of it just because of the whole Matt Ryan thing.
Yes, so it is a pick dependent on if Ryan suits up. I don't know. Schaub might not be like that bad as a fill-in. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
It is a little hard to predict, but
Yeah. I'm staying off of it, though. Just because of that situation.
Schaub did get him a garbage time touchdown last week, so maybe we'll see more of that.
Yeah, true. All right. So let's go on to defense. So I want to start us off here. I'm going to be loaded up on some Jaguars defense. They've had some very solid weeks, especially against bad teams. Look at their week last week against Cincinnati, put up 17 points. Now this guy is seeing ghosts, which we don't even know if Darnold's even going to be playing now because he had his toenail removed. So we don't even know that. And their defense has been solid. Their game plan is to run the ball with Fournette. So it kind of just fits it perfectly for a defense that costs $2,900. I think it's a very solid pickup, and I'm expecting a lot of points out of him.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the high-owned ones this week. It's a really good play.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty obvious one. I'm surprised they stayed under 3,000.
Yeah, I was too.
Well, the only one I think is interesting were the Texans going against Oakland. I think this is going to be a game where Derek Carr is going to have to do a lot. There's going to be a lot of passing, especially with the second highest total, which will probably end up being the highest total after the Atlanta game gets adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
Houston is really good against the run. They're top 5, so they have the ability to bottle up Jacobs. And Carr has not had a 300-yard passing game in 2019, and he's sitting at a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Texans are at a good price point to save some money, and they're going to be in a matchup with a lot of passing and hopefully with some
turnovers.
Yeah, some pick sixes and things like that.
Oof, I don't know, but I don't think I would stick on them.
Why not?
Yeah. I mean, they're cheaper and they'll definitely be overlooked by a lot of people. There's no doubt about that. All right. So, sneaky pick of the week.
So, the one I wanted to... I'm not sure how sneaky he'll actually be, but I do like Ty Johnson filling in for Kerryon Johnson. He's sitting at 4,900 going against the Giants. He ended up getting a majority of the work versus McKissick. He got 14 touches versus, I'm not even sure if I was saying it right, McKissick 7 last week. The Giants are averaging 131 rushing yards allowed per game, and they just allowed 3 rushing touchdowns and 126 yards last week to a backup running back in Edmonds. And, to go along with that, it is the third highest total of the week, like I said before, at 49.5, but Detroit is favored by 7, so I think the run game's going to get going. They're going to try to run out the clock.
You kind of took part of what I was going to go for, but I was kind of looking at the other side there. I was looking at McKissick for a lot of the same reasons, not the same reasons as far as usage, but he's basically kind of a receiver that's used as a running back. And I think he's going to be able to get a lot of receptions in there. I think it's going to be a dual campaign. Let's, take one at a time, not give the full load to him. So I kind of went with the other side, with the price point being about $1,000 cheaper with McKissick. But I was right in the same boat.
I feel like Johnson's the safer play because he's getting more volume, but
agreed.
McKissick he'll definitely be the lower owned of the two.
Yeah, I thought he was the sneakier pick, though.
He's definitely sneakier if he ends up working out.
Yeah. But again, pretty much for all the same reasons, just a little lower usage and just kind of a little bit more off the radar. Let's move on to our gut check.
Ooh, gut check!
I think I started last week, so you go first this time.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with the super cheap options here. Let me get some Ryan Tannehill, pair with my Corey Davis, which is going to open up a lot of money. plug in. Let's see. Now, I'm going to look at some Austin Eckler. Again, I hope they play him like he should be played. He's been looking really good, but I just hate that sharing it with Melvin Gordon. So I'm crossing my fingers right now and hoping they play it the right way. Let's play some James White, get those receptions in there. Let's see. I want to go with your... Who was your Houston pick? Not
Stills.
DeAndre Hopkins, Stills. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to go with him, but I'm going to have so much money here because choosing all these cheap guys. I feel like you can never really go wrong with Michael Thomas. So let me put him in as one of the more expensive ones. Tight end. I'm going to go with Hunter Henry in there. And I'm just going to have loads of money on here for this final pick after the defense is done. Kind of want to go with this Patriots defense here because it's been pretty solid, and Baker Mayfield is all about some interceptions. So let me go with that and pay up on that. I've got 7,600 remaining. And I think I'm going to go with Godwin, the other side of your Tampa Bay pick.
All right.
And that is my lineup.
All right, let's see here. So first off, I think I'm going to go ahead and plug in some Watson.
All right.
I'm going to do Watson Stills, like I said before.
Yeah.
And we'll switch over to running backs. Let me do Sony Michel.
Oh man.
He gets more carries. I know it's very close between him and White.
Yeah.
It really is a coin flip as to which one's going to have the bigger game.
Mm-hmm. I feel like White's not going to be used as much of a running back as Sony Michel is.
Oh yeah, Michel definitely gets more carries.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other running back. Let me go ahead and do Gurley. Let me pay up for him.
Gotcha.
Wide receiver wise, we got two more to fill in. Let's go ahead and do some Evans. And then let me do some DK Metcalf. I think he's in another good spot this week.
Mm-hmm.
And tight end wise, let's go ahead and plug in some Ingram
For that bounce back week.
And defense wise, yeah, let me do the Texans defense because I'm going to need a couple extra bucks for the flex.
Yeah.
And flex wise, I hate doing it, but I'm going to have to do some John Brown.
John Brown. Yeah. I mean, he's been doing pretty well. I know it's against your team, but...
If he is going to have a big week, it's definitely going to be this week.
Yeah. All right. So we have completed the podcast, guys.
Yeah, so that was week 8. That was another episode of the BSDFS Fantasy Football Podcast. We appreciate everybody tuning in, and hopefully you can go win some money with these picks. I think that's going to do it for us. Peace.